Yeah, I'm intrigued by that. I've never done any type of martial art, but would
Yeah.
like to.
Yeah, I highly recommend it for, yeah, it's been really sweet for me. So I love it. I like intense shit like that. So
Yeah.
yeah. I
Well,
think
sweet.
I think I lost you on the old video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're frozen. Or you're doing a really good ventriloquist job.
You see any movement?
Nope.
Okay.
You're frozen like this.
Weird. Well, your
Yeah.
video's still working over here, so I'll just roll with it for now.
Cool. We'll go with it.
If yours gets all jacked up or something, or it's causing problems, then we'll try something different. But
And we'll panic and scream and
yeah, exactly.
set things on fire. Good.
Well, sweet man. Where are you? Where are you at?
I'm in my office in my house, in my big bougie house, and I am outside of Asheville, North Carolina. I'm in
Oh, nice.
a town called Barnardsville, North Carolina.
Nice.
Yeah. Where are
Okay.
you?
I'm in a small town like 40 minutes north of Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Town called North Branch. Just a little country town.
Is that where you're originally from?
Yeah, I grew up here. I grew up to in Wisconsin until I was like 10, and
Oh,
then
okay.
moved here to Minnesota, which was just like an hour away. And then went to high school here, and a little while after I graduated, moved to Minneapolis, lived in and around Minneapolis for, the last however many years, and just moved back to North Branch this past July. So,
Okay.
yep.
And you said you were a little bit more in the sticks now, eh?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty close to the town here, but it's like, on 25 acres or so, and it's outside of town enough to be like feel pretty remote,
Yeah,
you know, and a bunch of wildlife out here and stuff. And
that's great. Good for you.
yeah, getting some chickens going and yeah.
In your country own.
Yep, exactly.
That's great.
Well, sweet man. Let me make sure I'm recording here.
Looks like you are.
Yeah. I'm just actually recording the audio on Ableton Live
Oh,
as
okay.
well, so I needed to fire that up. All right, sweet. Well, I discovered you through Sean Slade, who was a recent guest on my podcast. He shared something of yours on his Instagram story, and I was like, this dude seems sweet.
Oh, cool.
I was intrigued by I forget how you put it on your Instagram, holistic survival skills, maybe?
Yeah, holistic survival school is my school.
School, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, but I don't know a whole lot about what you're doing yet, which is
Yeah.
kind of, sometimes I look into stuff or prepare more than other times, and this is one of those times where I did not prepare.
I
Um, so
appreciate your
I'm
honesty.
I'm basically like a listener on this one too. So I would love to hear about what it is exactly that you're doing with the survival school, and how you got into it. What was the journey to it?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, holistic survival school. Well, maybe I'll go with the journey first. I listened to a few of the other ones, and you were like, "Yeah, just give me the origin story," and I was like, "I like that as a starting point."
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, for me, I felt like I grew up kind of like the golden child of what I would call like our current dominator culture, right? Of like my parents were like upper middle class; they're both teachers. I had a pretty good life, like I didn't have any problems, did well in school. I played lots of sports, did well in sports. I did everything, quote unquote, like as I should, or as I, was told I should do. And I felt pretty miserable. And I saw a lot of people that I perceived as not being like happy and felt like a big void, just like, wait a minute, this is it. Like, this is all we're supposed to do. Like, I've done
Mhm.
everything exactly right. And this is the result. Um, but I went through college and did all that same stuff, was just like living for other people. And finally at like 25, I was just like, fuck this. I'm living for myself. I'm going to listen to my heart, what I've been denying my whole life. And what that amounted to was quitting being a teacher. Um, because I was a public school teacher for a short minute and was just like, this is miserable, like I loved mentoring. I was coaching and teaching, and I loved that. But what I hated was that I had to teach, silly science requirements when these kids that came to me, my students, didn't know how to eat properly, didn't know what emotions were. They'd have big traumatic events happen in their life, and they'd come to me and be like, whoa, I got my girlfriend pregnant and I'm 14, or, my dad hit me last night, and I legally couldn't help them with those issues, but I had to teach them about ribosomes and like cell nuclei and all this stupid shit.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, really? And so I quit that. I was like, I got to teach something else. And I happened to stumble upon wilderness therapy, which is just a broad, generalized, different programs. I moved out west to Utah and found this job at a wilderness therapy company. And this one specifically worked with at-risk youth, teenagers, 13 to 18, and they used primitive skills or earth-based skills or ancestral skills, however you want to call it, like making fire with sticks, for example, as a way to teach kids and help them through their issues and through their traumas and through their blocks. So I did that, and I just fell in love with it. I got to mentor people, and I got to work through the emotional landscape. I got to learn skills and use my hands and use that as like the analogy for teaching and learning. And I just fell in love with it. I just like I dedicated my life to that basically. And like for the first 6 months, I was just like, yep, this is what I'm doing the rest of my life. And since then, that was a number of years ago now. I guess that started in 2000. What was that? God, 2012. I started that. So since then, I was just been like trying to figure out how to bring that to everyday life for people, to adults, because that program I worked for was very expensive and just for teenagers. But it was incredibly impactful, and I saw that how well nature and skills healed these people. And so I've just been trying to figure out how to bring this to adults, and I started my school, Holistic Survival School, to help people, get in touch with those skills is how I first started, just like, hey, let's learn these skills and learn how to be human again. These ancient skills that we all have in common, no matter where we're from in this world. And then more recently, I've kind of been on this kick of culture. I'm trying to rebuild culture. So, which is a whole nother topic, but basically like we could look at culture throughout the world and just be like, okay, there are earth-based cultures that are based in, mentoring is a big part of earth-based culture, right? So people older than you mentored, people younger than them. Elder culture, having elders in your life, that's part of earth-based culture. There's all these like aspects: music, song, dance, ceremony, ritual, rites of passage, gratitude. These are all like commonalities through human culture across the world. And so I use skills now to help people give them like a baseline of like, here are the skills to help you get in the woods and feel comfortable. And hopefully when you get in the woods, you start touching on what it means to be you and what it means to be human. And then that brings about your gifts, right? So you're like, oh, I've always wanted to weave, or I've always wanted to heal people, or I've always wanted to whatever. And so just inviting that individual to come into a more of themselves, right? And then eventually, if we all do that enough, then we kind of start to reconstitute the village, right? We start getting this village look. So now I have a 10-month immersion program where I work with adults, and it's 1 weekend a month for 10 months, and we learn skills and we connect with each other and we do breath work and we see each other and work through our traumas and our blocks. And it's really fucking magical and beautiful.
That's amazing, dude.
Yeah. That was
That's
a lot
right.
there. That makes sense.
No, that was perfect. I mean, I was down to let you go as long as you were there, or as long as you wanted. That was great. So I got few different questions that are popping up in my head here, but I wanted to comment quickly on the culture building aspect. For quite a while, I've been pretty interested in diet in general, and how there's all these different opinions about diets and keto and vegan and carnivore and just all this different stuff, and
Yeah.
nobody knows what to eat. Everything's bad one week or good the next or whatever. And
Mm,
talking to my brother a lot about this stuff because he's really into diet as well. And one of the conclusions I came to was like, we don't have any, you know, cultural history as most, European Americans, as
mhm.
far as like, we were disconnected from our cultural heritage as far as
Mhm.
what we eat and what our
Totally.
diet should be. And yeah, we could look to, I'm German and maybe Norwegian or whatever. I could look back to that and try to reconnect to that, but that doesn't feel completely authentic. I could try to look at, indigenous American diets, and because that's kind of what's around me now as far as,
Mhm.
um, but that doesn't feel fully, so it's just like there's no, and it goes beyond diet, obviously, but I really resonate with that feeling of like wanting to rebuild some sense of like
Mhm.
a new culture that has probably various different aspects from indigenous stuff and our own European heritages, but also like incorporating the novel aspects of what it means to be a human in the United States of America right now or wherever you happen to be in the world.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Yeah, and thanks for like when I say culture rebuilding, like, there are some somewhat intact earth-based cultures that still exist in the Americas, and I want to like name them, like when I
Yeah.
say, "Oh, I'm rebuilding culture," I don't want people to be like, they're native people, like, we fucking had this culture this whole time, and y'all are fucking it up, so
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
really like, um name them and like give love to all the indigenous people of this continent, and of how they still hold on to some of that, and
Mm.
how um there's so much grief there, obviously, to understand that that genocide that happened, but also like such joy that they like there's still some left, so there's still like traditions left, whether it be songs or skills or whatever. Yeah,
Mhm.
so when I say, yeah, rebuilding, it's like mostly for this me and people who are probably more like me and you, European ancestry, who just kind of feel like orphans, and maybe
Mhm.
that's one way of describing what I felt like when I was a kid. Just like everything is so fleeting and passing. Cool, I got my Power Rangers toy. Like, all right, well, how's that fit into the big scheme of things? Like I just it felt very shallow growing up in that way.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I hear you about the diet. It's it's a great question, and I don't have something I'm searching for myself. Yeah, I was curious when you said, I'm German and Norwegian, and you're like, but that doesn't feel authentic to go back
Mhm.
there for your diet. I was curious of why that was for you.
Well, to be honest, I haven't gotten too deep into, what those exact diets consisted of. I mean, I have a general idea of some of the things, and I'm sure that if I go far enough back to, really like self-sufficient, the older German, Norwegian type diets, I'm sure it's not that far off of what I could be doing just on the land around me here. Um, but I guess why I say it doesn't feel right to me necessarily is just like I don't personally feel a strong connection to like a German or Norwegian heritage. Like if I started to dig into it, maybe it would ignite something,
Hmm.
and maybe there is a benefit to integrating some aspects of that, but it doesn't feel like that's the totality of like I don't feel like I just, you know, am one step removed from it and I can just go to my German grandmother and get all these recipes, and you know what I mean? Like it's
Sure,
just not
sure.
like that for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that I'm exposed to through people that I'm starting to come in contact with, like Sam Thayer, is like more indigenous knowledge about foraging and preparation of certain things like acorns and different
Mhm.
things. So like I'm getting exposed to that, and that's interesting to me and feels like it's resonating.
Yeah.
But obviously I have a certain genetic heritage that does go back to certain types of foods, probably like lutefisk and different things
So
along that, and potatoes and everything. So it's like I guess I just feel a little bit like uh not integrated in terms of like those things. I don't know if
Mhm.
that explained it very well, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. That totally makes sense. Yeah, hearing you say it's just like, yeah, there's something there, but you haven't like dug into it and you're not necessarily feeling like a big call to it.
hmm
And I can totally resonate with like, I'm not a big agriculture guy. Like, I don't know what it is in me. I just always have felt more like a hunter gatherer where I'm like, let me roam with the bison and like
sure,
move every week. And like, that's been my jam.
that's cool.
And so when I hear like, oh yeah, my ancestors, I'm Irish, Scottish, German, and like my ancestors grew potatoes. I'm like, well, fuck that. I don't want to grow potatoes. Like, I want to go
Yeah,
hunt. And like, that's the part of me that feels, I feel more that way. But there is now I own 20 acres and I'm like
Mhm.
learning permaculture. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah,
like, how do I do this? And I've definitely gone from this like, my earlier days in these skills, it was like wander here and go hunt here and go do this and go forward
sure.
for this. And it was like really sexy and fun. It was kind of like all these one night stands all over the land. And now I'm like, oh shit, I'm married to this 20 acres
That's
and I'm
cool.
like the steward of this place. And like, how can I grow food here without destroying the forest? And like, it's just like a whole nother world. And I think one important thing to remember is, I was doing a boys' rites of passage not that long ago, and someone was like, "Well, how long is it going to take us to rebuild all this culture, all these for these white people?" And I'm like, "Well, it's like how long does it take this forest to regrow back to a healthy forest?" And like about 400 years. Like
Yeah.
it's really that long. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the same thing with our gut bacteria. Like
Mm,
that is a huge part of diet and overall health, mental
mm,
health, physical health, and everything. And I wouldn't be, we've just been bombing ourselves the last few generations with antibiotics that just completely wipe the slate clean. And so it sucks because it's like this super zoomed out vision of culture building, whether it be our our gut culture or our life culture, and it's like, oh shit, like I'm never gonna get there.
yeah.
Zoom out and look at how indigenous people on this continent lived at a place for 10,000 years and had
Yeah.
stories and songs, and their gut flora was connected to the land, and their everything was so deeply rooted. That's how long it will take for us to rebuild. And so it's shitty in some way where it's like, fuck, I'll never get there myself. But it's also, for me, it's relieving where I'm just like, cool, like this is way bigger than me. And I don't have to have it figured out before I die, but I can pass something on, hopefully, that is a little bit bigger than me, is
Dude,
the goal.
that that's huge. I mean, that just like I don't know. I was smiling ear to ear there because it's like that's the shit that I've been thinking about lately,
Yeah.
like all the time. And to hear somebody articulate it like that, it's just nice
Mhm.
to feel like, okay, there's other people out there that are really feeling this. Like I'm going
Mhm.
around this land collecting black walnuts for the first time because there's a bunch of black walnut trees here, and I'm,
Mhm.
trying to figure out how to process those and everything. And it's like, man, I turn 36 next week and I'm just trying to do this for the first time. And
Yeah.
it's like, if I plant an apple tree or something, it's like I might not be eating the apples till I'm 40 years old. Like,
Mhm.
what happened? Where did all this time go? And why am I
Uh,
not, why did I not learn this as a little kid? Like, what am I doing? And it's like,
yeah.
how am I gonna get to a place where, not only myself, but the people around me, like I long to be in like a self-sustaining like community where people are right near me, not 10 miles away and I have to drive in my car, where we can all do this together, but it just feels like I'm looking up a giant mountain and I can just take these tiny little steps knowing that like you said, I'm probably never really going to get to the peak of what I can imagine, but it's like all
Mhm.
you can do is take these little steps, I guess.
Yeah, it's like big rock mountain in front of you, and like there's nothing growing on the mountain. It's like the best I could do is try to climb as high as I can and then die and then become compost. And then
Yeah.
maybe something will grow out of my body. Maybe, but probably need to stack up some, compost for a while. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh, I want
Feel
to
that.
go back to your what you're doing with adults, but I just wanted
Yeah.
to say one more thing that I thought of when you were mentioning the permaculture thing. I've been I'm a mixture of, I love the foraging, like hunter gatherer vibe and mentality. Like I'm
Hmm.
very interested in Sam Thayer's work and Daniel Vitalis stuff with Wild Fed, and I'm just really into that. But I have been intrigued with gardening and growing food, so I've like got these both things going on, and now I'm interested in permaculture, and I just went to a sort of a food forest and agroforestry class yesterday actually, and
I mean,
I also recently kind of over the past few months learned about this idea that some I don't know if it's archaeologists or who it is, but they're starting to think that the majority of the Amazon rainforest was actually like a permaculture food forest, basically. And so I love what you're saying about, like it's like it doesn't have to be one or the other because Thayer had a brilliant podcast with Daniel Vitalis recently, actually, where he was talking about how hunter gatherers weren't just necessarily wandering around constantly like grabbing what was there. They were also cultivating the land in a very, gentle and sort of sophisticated way. Uh,
totally.
that is a lot more integrated and high level, really, than like plow a field and plant a bunch of corn. It's like let's
Yeah.
take what's already there and maximize it, and
Yeah, I mean, they're indigenous people on this continent and in South America were masters of reading the Tao.
yeah,
Like they could read the Tao and be like, oh wait, this oak tree, I could cut it down and try to plant something there, or I could just cut down the trees around it and then get all my grain for the year in like one go. Like
mm,
I remember I did that last year where I just stumbled upon there was a subdivision development and I was walking past this oak tree that got full sun out of, it was at the right time. Wasn't too old of a tree. It wasn't too young of a tree. It was just right. The other trees got cut down and it was a massed year. I had never seen so many acorns in my life. Like I gathered like probably like 20 gallons of acorns in like maybe 15 minutes. I mean, it
oh
was
my
like
God.
insane. And it was like all the flour I could use for the whole year, healthier flour. And it literally took me 15 minutes of work. Granted, I didn't chop down the trees around it, the other trees, to give it more light. But it really is just like, yeah, they're just masters of food forests and permaculture and feeding themselves without having to work too hard and without destroying the landscape completely,
Hmm.
living in more of a harmony than European agriculture. And Europeans came over and were just totally ignorant to that fact and couldn't comprehend this other style of agriculture. And um, so they fucking destroyed it and
Yeah.
murdered everything. So it's really the Garden of Eden is really what it is. And so um, that's definitely more my speed, like I was saying before, of like how can I read the Tao of my own land and get food out of that without having to work my ass off.
Yeah, exactly. Um, so about your class, I'm interested in, I mean, definitely what you're doing with adults, but also, I mean, just in general, because I know you did stuff with younger people as well. Like, what is it about these skills that can help people heal? Um, yeah. What have you found in your own experience and in the experience of the people that you've taught?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of layers there. One simple layer I would say is confidence. That's kind of like one of my goals is at the start is we just have many of us have not been raised in the woods and raised with these, tangible skills to help us feel comfortable to take care of ourselves in the forest. And so it's hard to be nature connected if you don't feel safe in nature. So that's like step one is like,
Mm,
what's going to kill you? What's going to hurt you? How do you take care of yourself? What are the most important things as far as survival goes in this evolutionary lens? So that's what I studied when I was a biology teacher. I did a lot of evolution stuff. So I really like looking through that lens at the humans. So just like if I was teaching a survival class for squirrels, most of that class would be on avoiding hawks, right? And like our predator. But
Yeah.
what does the survival class look like for humans? Well, it's mostly about body temperature. That's our greatest strength and our greatest weakness.
Mm.
So that's basically, if you can keep yourself warm, but not too warm, you're going to be okay. So that's like, okay, we got that. That's kind of number one. Like, are you competent in, how to make things, how to make tools and gadgets to help keep you warm, like fire and shelter. Um, After that, there's this layer of doing these skills in a group, right? Like there's this witnessing each other, seeing each other, and being seen. So like if I just hang out by myself on a couch all day, I kind of forget who I am because I'm not having any contrast to who I'm not.
Mm.
So when I hang out in a group, I'm like, oh wow, that person's like super cheerful and like does this kind of thing. It's like, oh, that's kind of like me, but I'm kind of different. So we have all this surface area for us to kind of compare ourselves and like, oh, where do I fit in this village and who am I? And people are like, hey, Luke, you're really kind and you are really good at doing this, and you start hopefully hearing these reflections about, oh, what my gifts are and how that works and how other people perceive me. Um, so there's that layer of like doing things in a group is like really, really important and what we're meant to do as a species. So all this ties into survival, as you can kind of see, like that is
Yeah.
human survival is working together in groups. But then there's also this layer of like ancestral knowing, I guess you could say, like this shit is just in our bones,
Mm.
like you break rocks for the first time and almost everyone is just like, whoa, that feels really good. Like I'm supposed to do that. And it's just like, a monkey that forgot how to climb a tree or a dog that forgot how to chase, a squirrel. Like we're just meant
Yeah.
to do that. And when we do it for the first time, something just clicks and it's just like, oh my God, like I'm about to teach, we have a willow basket class and we just sit by the river and we just like weave these beautiful baskets all day. And almost everyone is just like, I've been here before. Like, I remember doing this, like singing songs while making baskets by the river. It just feels right. It feels good in my bones. So that's really potent. And then maybe one more would be, using the skills themselves as kind of this reflection of our own patterns.
Mm.
Um, so I have a saying, how you do one thing is how you do all things. And so, yeah, when you make a basket and you hit a hard part and you get frustrated, how do you handle that? Like that is real time practice for you to regulate your nervous system, to notice how you want to handle it, just like gut reaction. Oh, I just want to, whatever,
Mm.
smash it or say fuck it and leave, or whatever your reaction
Yeah.
is. And it's like, okay, notice what's going on, take a breath, take a moment. What do you want to do? So that's like real time practice to change our patterns from our survival patterns that we learned as kids to get love and acceptance into more conscious, choice based patterns.
Yeah. That all makes sense. I'm curious about the group aspect. Um, and maybe it's kind of self-explanatory with some of the other layers you mentioned, but I'm just curious if you have any extra insight on, you know, why is doing something like starting a fire, like a friction fire, why is that different for a group to do that? How does that affect a group differently than, say, playing a game of basketball or,
Mm.
any other, more random or modern group activity?
Uh-huh. Yeah. How does doing primitive skills differ
Yeah,
than?
like why does it bring out different things? What is it about people connecting on this more like primal or ancestral type of level?
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, it's a good question. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know if it really does matter.
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes I really do think that where I've seen some really good teachers who are just like, hey, okay, we're all gonna, make gibberish, like we'll do gibberish. We're just going to say gibberish words for the next 30 minutes and see what happens.
Yeah.
Just like notice the patterns, notice what's arising in you.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, can be some of the deepest shit ever if you're paying attention, right? And
Sure.
so
Yeah.
sometimes I'm like, I don't think it really matters. Like, I
Yeah.
think we gather, be in the woods, be away from our phones, be away from our normal patterns, and just be. And I could come with a different curriculum and just be like,
Sure.
oh, we're gonna fucking do this today, and probably do most of the work, I'll say. But and sometimes I say to my students too, of like, listen, the skills just get you here. Like people sign up for the skills. They're like, oh, I want to do skills and I want to learn this and I want to be competent and I want to, like tan my own hide and I want to do this, and like kind of this like rigid, like, well, if I just do this, is the ego trick, right? This is like, so I do a lot of survival patterns, or these psychological patterns, and how we get stuck in them. And one of the ego's classic patterns is, if I do X, Y, and Z, then I'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so
100%.
if I get organized, then I'll be okay. If I get enough money, then I'll be okay. If my partner loves me, then I'll be okay. And so all these lies. And so a lot of times, not always, but a lot of students, and this is myself too, I'm still so guilty of this, of like, oh, if I just learned how to do this skill a little bit better, then I'll be okay.
Yeah.
And so people sign up for those skills saying, well, if I just learn these skills, then I'll be okay. Right. And that's great. There's nothing wrong with wanting to learn ancestral skills, but if you're doing it to make yourself okay and to feel good and to feel happy, like that's not going to work either, because it's an external thing. So, but obviously, if I have my eyes on this prize of me being the compost for this
Yeah.
cultural rebuilding, then I don't want to do whatever stupid little thing like basketball. Maybe basketball's not even going to be around in 100 years, or maybe Monopoly or whatever the fuck. It's like these small things. But what will I know will be, or what I hope will be here, in 100 years, is a basswood tree that is still going to have the same characteristics of being really good to make fire with sticks, and people will still have that process, while these other cultural things are just like dust in the wind. I'm like, I don't know if those are going to be here. So if I had to pick something to help rebuild culture, it's going to be
Yes.
these skills, because I pray that they're going to be around for a long time. And it's what we were built to do. We just have millions of years of evolution, like literally millions. Like humans have been breaking rocks for 2.3 million years and tending fire, harnessing wildfire for about that same time, like over 2 million years. So it's just what we're supposed to do. And I don't think my body was meant to play basketball. So at least my
Yeah.
ankle feels that way after years of playing basketball. It feels a little messed up now. So
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. I love the sort of ego trick thing. I feel like I've um come to realize that there's like a genius in that. It's like the things that you're attracted to are like exactly where you need to be to grow.
yeah.
It's like you get attracted to thinking like, oh, if I, get this girl, like if I get this, you know, this partner to validate me, like then I'll
Uh-huh.
be okay. And it's like on one hand it doesn't work because you're never gonna get that, okay, I'm okay now feeling from one of those pursuits. But it does seem like it's some sort of deeply intelligent part of you guiding you towards something that's in the shadows maybe for you that needs to be uncovered and needs to grow. So
Yeah.
it's like
Absolutely.
we oftentimes rag on the ego and all this stuff, but it's like
Yeah.
there's just an intelligent process that seems to be going on. It's not always pleasant, but it seems to be in our best interest usually, even if we're following a thing
Totally.
that seems to be short-sighted or something. Like there is some reason for it, some sort of
Yeah.
growth opportunity.
Yeah. Another one of quotes I use them with my students a lot is, all paths lead to God. Like
Yeah.
if you're paying attention and pursuing, no matter what you do, it's eventually, you could go on a fucking heroin binge and all that shit. Eventually you're going to hit rock bottom, and then that's going to point you to, oh, this other path, right? And all of
Yeah.
those steps in between, those were God too. Like that's fucking important too.
Hmm.
And Yeah. And so, yeah, the ego is this like really, funny thing. And it's really fucking useful. Like
Mm-hmm.
I too am like, oh, we rag on the ego too
Yeah.
much. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it is really important. We can't be open and all nothing but love and light and God all the time. We'd get fucking destroyed in this world. So,
Yeah.
so it's really important. And yeah, well, that's been a big lesson I've been feeling in my life lately is just like the obstacles are the work. Like I'm like, oh, this thing was out of the way, then I could really do the work. I could really feel God, or I could really do X, Y, or Z once again, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, oh shit, that is the work right there. This resistance I'm feeling, or
Mm-hmm.
this thing that I think is the obstacle is the actual thing.
Yep.
And yeah, another thing it brought up for me was do you watch Westworld? Do you ever see that show?
No, I've never seen it.
Oh shit, man, you should watch it.
Okay.
If you're into this sort of consciousness, like
Oh
pattern
yeah.
kind of thing, oh my God, man, it like blew my mind. And one of the quotes from it is like, the first stage of all like evolution or consciousness shifting is suffering.
Mm.
That is the impetus for all things to change is
Mm-hmm.
suffering. And so without that, it's not going to happen. So that really always sticks with me, and add
Yeah.
some robots in there and then some, future shit, and it gets real good real fast.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was another thing you were talking about that kind of brought some things to mind for me, and it was kind of going towards like if you're looking at it from the perspective of being the compost for the cultural rebuilding, it's like why not, you know, you're kind of faced with this, well, it only makes sense to teach things that are so foundational to humanity that we've lost touch with so much that like that just makes more sense than anything else. Um, because, it stands the test of time, really.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of spiral dynamics at all, research of this guy, Claire W. Graves. It's really interesting stuff, and I've brought it up on the podcast a million times. So,
Okay.
but
Million
if
times
it,
in one. Do it again.
yeah, pretty much every episode. But I just love it, and I really think people, anybody who finds it at all intriguing should check it out and learn about it. But it's basically a theory of developmental psychology, and it kind of goes through these stages of growth that humans go through, both individually and collectively. And it's
Mm.
less of a theory and more of just like a research model. This dude
Mm.
did all this research on these stages of development that people go through and what their value systems are basically, and how their value systems relate to their complexity of their life situations. And so it's like when your value system is in line with the complexity of your life situation,
Mm-hmm.
you're generally at ease or, satisfied. But
Uh,
once your complexity starts to, you know, kind of get more than your coping capacity or your value system, there
right.
starts to be a lot of dissonance. And like you said, it starts with that suffering piece of you wake up one day and you're like, man, things just aren't really working.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of, as it gets further, things get more and more complex. Like maybe say you went from a 9 to 5 to being self-employed. And so there's like all these new complexities, and, your values and your coping strategies don't function the same. And so it sort of like pulls you up to this different level. You have to learn all these new skills. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a long-winded thing here, but basically, um, we go through these shifts as a culture as well. The last one we went through was from sort of like a agricultural society to a modern industrial scientific society. And right now we're kind of going through a shift from modern scientific industrial to postmodern relativistic. And so you can see that in the social things that are going on, postmodernism and relativism and all of this. And obviously, you can see all sorts of chaos in the social structures and political structures and all of this. And so the
Totally.
idea is that we're shifting to this new layer of I guess you could call it consciousness or value system.
Uh-huh.
And there's a layer beyond this one that's actually coming up pretty quick. That's a whole like quantum leap in human development, basically.
Mm.
And all of this is to say that I have this sense intuitively beyond this model, which I think you might relate with, is like we're kind of our culture or our society is sort of like a sand castle almost, or it's built it's built on some stilts or something. Like we're advancing so far technologically,
Mm.
um, but we have no real foundation, you know. Like kids can
Mhm.
get on their phone and they can look at TikTok and see people all over the world and do all these fancy technological things, but they can't start a fire or know
Totally.
how to stay warm at night.
We
You
don't
know,
know
so
where
it's
our water comes from. We don't know where our shit goes. Like
exactly.
talking
So
about
it's like
basics.
we're so fragile, and so I feel like I have this sense of sort of uh anxiety, I guess you could call it, or foresight in terms of like
Mm.
right now, a lot of our systems, I think, are starting to collapse and are going to continue to collapse as we have to change them. They're just not working anymore. And so I
Totally.
feel like something that you're doing, I also feel called to do, which is like get back to the basics,
Hmm.
because we now more than ever, we need people who understand how to just survive and potentially even thrive if we get communities of people who know how to grow food and forage and hunt and,
Totally.
self-sustain basically. So that was a very long-winded thing there, but maybe you could just,
Great.
if
Yeah.
you relate to that at all, or
Totally. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing. I think you nailed it. And yeah, we're making these huge leaps, and we still have these earth-based bodies, that are tempered and seasoned in millions of years of our ancestry, whether that be, like your German ancestry not that long ago,
Yep.
or our, ape ancestor, 3 million years ago in the savannah of Africa. Um, and yeah, that's another one of my goals in creating holistic survival school, is creating a place that says like well, what if we went back actually, or what if we actually just stopped moving forward? Like,
Yeah.
because everything in culture says go forward, everything. And there's actually this cool psychological study of like basically human minds are meant to add things. Like there was a solution presented or a problem presented to some participants in the study, and there is an equal solution. Like you could take away one block or you could add one block, and that would create balance, right, on the scale.
Hmm.
And almost everyone wants to add one block. Okay. And no one wanted to remove a block. And there's something there in our mind that we always want to add, and we always want to go forward, and we always want to innovate. And that's what got us, that's what made us fucking badass hunters. Like that's what made our European ancestors kill woolly mammoths using sticks and stones. Like
Yeah.
that's badass shit, and I want to honor that. But if it goes untempered without this conscious, choice in it, and it's just gut reaction, let's keep innovating and invent a new thing, then yeah, we're going to be in trouble here. So it's just like this. Everything in life is this double-edged sword. Just like, wow, that was really cool. We invented atlatls and like
Yeah.
baskets, and wow, we've done such amazing things. And now that same thing is inventing iPhones and I don't know, Kim Kardashian's butt. Like
Yeah.
it's like whoa,
Exactly.
whoa, whoa. Maybe we don't need to keep going. So I
Yeah.
hope that Holistic Survival School is just one small voice. Like. And I know there's people like you, and like there is a rising conscious around this of like, well, we have to be really careful about what we're doing next. And yeah, but it's very against our nature to go back or to slow down or to remove things. It's hard. It's hard to
Yep.
do.
Yeah, I totally resonate with what you're saying. I feel like, I know, maybe I shouldn't say I know. I believe there are various different, I mean, political motivations and potentially sinister motivations to various things that have gone on with the COVID pandemic. We don't need to get into all that stuff right now if you don't want to. But
I was like, "Well, you want to go there? Do you want to?"
all I'm gonna say is, well, at least for now, is that I think my gut tells me there's gonna be more things along the lines of a COVID-19, regardless of any party's influence over whether these things are completely natural and coincidental or whether they're partially engineered. Whatever the case may be, what I'm trying to say is, like, I think that life will continue to present us with opportunities, or force us, maybe rather, into situations where we need to pause, and because I agree exactly with what you're saying. Like, I used to work in the field of group homes and working with developmentally disabled adults and mentally ill adults, and there was many crisis situations. And one thing I learned is that sometimes the best thing to do is to do nothing. Because if you think you just need to say something to try to resolve a conflict, but you're activated and you're not still and you're not aware, you can just so easily inflame the situation further and push things over the edge. So sometimes exactly what you need to do is do nothing. Just pause, observe, breathe.
Yeah.
And
See,
so
go ahead. Yeah.
I just feel like, foregoing any of the other tributaries of the whole COVID-19 thing, these types of situations, I think, as we transition through these chaotic times of the destruction of our sort of homeostasis and the emergence of a new homeostasis as like a human civilization, we're going to be encountered with these various times where what we need to do is pause and observe and try to gain wisdom. And there's going to be a lot of people who are going to push to make a decision, rush ahead, try a thing like block out the sun with dust, take a mRNA vaccine that you have no idea what it's going to do, all just any rash decision to try to quote unquote fix something versus like trying to take a pause and breathe and say, like, why is this happening? What are the deeper reasons? What could we do to really like holistically approach this situation? Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And I was just laughing at the fractal nature of it all. Like that individual desire to want to react and not breathe, right? And just learning to take that moment to pause. And then how we do that as a whole world, especially with our fast moving technology, just everyone's like, okay, next, I just,
Yeah.
how fast, I just can't fathom how fast we're moving compared to a few generations ago. Like I read, like, I don't know, Thoreau or someone in like 1800s or early 1900s, and he's like, like shit is so fast these days, like everyone's moving so quickly, and you're like, really? Like you were saying that back then, like, so yeah, it's a, and that's why even more reason to get people out in the woods and to notice their patterns and to notice their impulses and to notice their fears and to get back to the basics of it, and just to remember that everything comes from the earth, and no matter what, every senator signs for a bill or whatever, like it's all going back, it's all coming from the earth in one way or another. And so just remembering that connection, it's not bad. It's not bad to, whatever, cast these spells and have food summoned to you, you can, use your credit card and food gets delivered to your house. It's not bad inherently, but if we don't remember that it comes from the earth and that I'm casting a spell, like it can get out of control and get out of hand. So.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like you are somebody who, because I think there's probably another trap to think like, oh, all we need to do is go back to our ancestral times and we just need to make friction fires and hunt with, bows, and then everything's going to be okay. But,
Yeah.
I could see that as a criticism, but you know, because maybe some people think like, no, we don't need to learn how to do that. What we need to do is, you know, integrate electric cars into society and do this or come up with this new technology that's going to do this. Like, what,
Right.
I guess, I don't know what the specific question is here, but I have this sense of like, you know, I find myself wanting to return to nature just instinctually and learn how to cultivate food and forage and hunt and learn these skills. But there's these little times where I sort of check in with myself and question, like, you know, am I trying to resist the
Mm.
forward motion, not of society and technology, but just of life itself? Like, life is obviously moving in these directions.
Yeah.
Um, but, you know, I think what I come to is like, I'm not opposed to technologies. Like here I am, you know,
Mhm.
talking to you over the internet on a computer.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I make music on the computer. I love some of these technologies, but it feels so out of balance. Like we're so out of balance towards the technological realm and our connection to the planet we live on and our the ways that we sustain ourselves through eating and sleeping and all of these things are so disconnected. So I don't know what the question is, but maybe just riffing on the you know, have you gone through any similar types of feelings of like, do you ever feel like you're romanticizing the past or natural
Mhm.
connection or any of these things?
Yeah, fucking great question. I mean, yeah, I definitely like went through my like more like rigid anarchist, like idealist stage, where I was like, how can I destroy as many Walmart trucks as
Like
possible?
Ted Kaczynski out in the
Yeah.
shack.
Well, I never got there. Like, I was simply like closer on that spectrum, we'll say. Um, yeah, and I saw that, and another saying that I hold close is like that which you resist persists.
Mm,
That which you fight against, whether we're fighting against bacteria with antibacterial hand soap or whatever, like it tends to make it stronger. And so I've always been really into Jesus and Buddha and their ways of doing things and just like kind of creating this third way, like not this, not that, but something in between.
mm,
And in that way, it loses all of its force. Like I think our current American political system is designed to create this versus that, right?
yep,
Which divides
yep.
us. And so when we create this third way, it's like so different and weird that like you can't fight against it. There's like no grip to like push against the thing. Um, and so that's what I try to strive for, I guess I would say, in this like new world. Because you're right, because it's like this is maybe this is the suffering we were talking about that we need to grow. Like maybe this world needs to suffer before I will ever learn. Maybe that's part of the path, and that's God too. Like that's
Mm,
that's that's holy and sacred too. But I definitely try to catch myself in this romanticizing the past, like in the past they didn't deal with this, and it's like no, like there was shit in the past, like on this continent and my ancestors, like you fucking got stomped by a woolly rhinoceros or whatever, got abducted and murdered by a village, a tribe next door, like there was shit back then. So I don't want to play onto that, that noble savage, belief or story of the people of this continent or of my ancestry either. And the more I think I'm starting to get to this place as a naturalist of when I read old stuff from old naturalists and look at my forest now, like it's very different. Like
yeah.
I go to the woods now and it's like, oh, this is what it was like in the old times. And it's like, no, no, it wasn't. Like things have shifted so drastically in the last 10,000 years, in the last 100 years, that it just doesn't exist. The past doesn't exist in that way. It's like always something new. And that's like beautiful in a way of like, wow, this is a new forest. Like, what does this look like when it has these native species mixed with these invasive ones? And
Mm,
there's like interest in that. And there's also a lot of grief in that too,
yeah.
And so it's like rebuilding this culture or maybe even like reconstituting it, I think is the thing. Because I don't want to make it seem like we're just starting from scratch. Like there is a culture that I adopted, that there's some sort of root to it that I'm trying to find and maybe grow that root too, of like hanging out with my older family members and hearing stories, and like I want to go to Europe and like visit my ancestry, like my places, and like try to rebuild that. So there is like never like a starting anew. We're always rebuilding from the, what we were given, and then trying to create, from that. But yeah, I think it's a great point that you make to say like, yeah, let's be careful not to romanticize this, because we have 8 billion people on this world. And if we all just started being hunter gatherers, there's going to be great suffering. We just can't do it. So it's one of those, what I call a sacred question. Like I will never know the answer to to that question of like finding the balance between giving in to the momentum of what culture is and like going with the flow and not fighting it so much, and also fighting it because fuck that shit, And also like, this is not the way I want my children to live, in these ways, X, Y, and Z.
100%.
But it's kind of like this blob where it's like, there's just like this cultural blob and momentum, and this blob is slowly moving towards whatever advancement technology. And me as an individual, like I can just like, I'm this little tiny dot coming out of the blob, and I can resist and try to pull that blob in the opposite direction. But it's like, if it's just me, I'm only going to pull that much, but it's a tiny, tiny amount. But if we all start kind of, moving that way a bit, then there's some momentum to it. So, so when I get overwhelmed and I get like dark and sad and depressed about the current state of the world, it really helps me to zoom out and remember that I can just do tiny, tiny things with my one simple, silly life. And we've done a lot of lives that have put us where we are now. And I can't save the damn world, but I'm going to do my damnedest to like do what I can do and bring about my gifts and bring about my medicine and live my life in the best way I can, that, the next generation, it's hopefully a little bit better.
Well, what I've been sensing from like doing things like this, finding people and talking to people through the podcast, or even, like the class I just went to about food forests, connecting with people there, my own friends around me. It's like the chaos of the world, and the disconnection from nature, I think is, sometimes it feels like it's less of a choice. I think about these things, but ultimately I'm inspired to or compelled to move towards certain things. And I don't have as much of a say in it as maybe sometimes I think that I do.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've been noticing is that, like you're saying, you're this little tiny individual coming out off a blob. And I think we've all sort of felt like that. And there's been little individuals coming off of that blob for quite some time. But as the rubber starts to hit the road, so to speak, more and more, and this breakdown sort of continues, it feels like that blob is still going full force, but there's like a separate blob that's, breaking off. It almost feels like there's break off societies starting to happen where, like, I've noticed, and I hate to again split it into a binary, but in some ways it does feel like there's somewhat of a binary where I'm sensing two sort of different motivations for people: either continue on with the, sort of church of progress mentality and just like, we need more technological innovation, we need like more sense of control and connection purely through technology and tracking of every single thing that everybody does, and like just a more intensified version of what we already have continuing, like, or people who are kind of like starting to have this sense of like, no, I want to be more connected, I want to be more self sustaining, I want to decentralize, I want to reform communities, like it does feel like there's almost these sort of two poles that people are either getting pulled towards one or the other, and there's this break off happening from the funny that we're continuing to call it the blob, but like this secondary blob that's starting to kind of like break off in a different direction. Do you sense that happening in your, in your spheres?
Yeah, I do. I do. I'm very lucky to live in a place that is pretty rich in that secondary blob breakout group.
Yeah.
There's definitely a subculture, in Asheville, the general Asheville region, I'll say, that is very much about this. And I feel very connected to lots of humans out here who I don't feel alone to. And I often forget how lucky I am. My brother just came and visited with his family down from Michigan, and he's doing his beautiful stuff up in Michigan. And he comes down to my community and is just like, holy shit, like you have so much community, you have so many people here who are on the same page with you, and that's very true. Like, so yeah, I do feel that. There's all the pros and cons that come with like living in Asheville, and there's like some gentrification, and sometimes too much of the Sky Clan, I would say, in the Asheville community.
What's
Sometimes.
Sky Clan?
It's lingo that we have that I use in Asheville. I don't know if Asheville uses it, but it's like if you're either Earth Clan, which is like a little more grounded and like practical and like maybe a little more cynical, that kind of comes with territory. And then there's Sky Clan, which is like head in the clouds, nothing but dreams, very idealist, very, like it's beautiful, like that's needed too. But sometimes
like Elon Musk is going to take us to Mars and save the world.
Yeah, but like Earth-based culture. So it's like, let's do ceremony. Let's only do ceremony. Let's only sing songs. And like, so there's like two realms of hippie,
and then a little more practical, like, hey, let's learn how to do some stuff and actually like, yeah.
And there's beauty in both. Like I need more Sky Clan in my life. Like I'm like Mr. like, oh, cynical and the world's going to shit and I'm depressed. And like let's make some rocks, let's break some rocks. I'm like, oh, I should sit in ceremony and like pray and sing and laugh and do more of those things more often. Yeah. So, but anyway, that's just like a whole Asheville thing. But yes, to answer your question, I think there is a big community that is forming in little pockets around the country and around the world. When I've traveled, I've just happened to stumble upon people. Probably because I used to have dreads, so that was easier to spot me. But and they would just like, in South Africa, they'd be like, "Hey, man, we gotta, grow our own food, and we got to get land back, and we got to do this and that." And I'm like, hell yeah, like that's great. Like we're totally on the same page with you. And so I saw that around the world, or at least I guess I'll say it. I saw it in Africa and seen it in Europe. And it was funny. One of the stories I wanted to tell earlier was about this progress thing. And I remember when I went down to Colombia and I did some survival stuff down in the jungle down there. And when we got out of the filming, I was in this little tiny village in like right on the Orinoco River and like we're really way in the jungle. And these people had these like the villagers had like little tiny huts and they had like tin roofs, and they were like, but they had mangoes in their garden and they had bananas and they had iguanas everywhere and they were raising a few goats and chickens and they just like kind of had everything they needed and they would nap, they'd have this siesta time and I'm like, and they would like meet me and they'd be like, oh, I want to like, get a motorcycle and I want to get a bigger house and I want to, like this American dream, bullshit that they've, been fed. And I remember I was trying to explain to them like how many people in America want the life they have, like I'm like, no, like, don't go for it. Like everyone in America wants your life. Like they want to grow food. They want to eat their own food. They want to like take naps. They want to raise kids. They want to be in this little connected town where everyone knows everyone. Like you're living the dream that we want, but they didn't get that. And I remember later being like, oh, that was kind of fucked up of me actually, that like try to tell them they shouldn't pursue their goals and their dreams. It's like that suffering is needed. They need to go to the top of that pyramid of culture and be like, oh yeah, I got to the top. Yeah, it's pretty lonely and shitty up here. This isn't the right way. Go back. Everyone go back. So it's kind of this funny thing with progress that we often can't notice what we had until it's gone. So
yeah, what you said really like brought me back to the spiral dynamics concept, and it's pretty much
Mhm.
exactly what you're describing there. It's like you
Mhm.
start to, when you start to understand this concept, it doesn't make sense to try to convince somebody to be somewhere that they're not. If they're
Mhm.
at a place where they're growing out of a subsistence living culture and they
Yeah,
want to experience the modern industrial way of being, um, it does no good to try to talk them out of it and convince them that they should stay where they're at or
totally.
vice versa. It's like, you know, you can't convince people to change. They
Mhm.
change when the situation is ripe for them to change. Like it does no good to argue with somebody on the other side of your political opinions and try to get them to,
Totally.
see your side of it. It's like, and when you start to realize that, you start to realize like you got to meet people where they're at, and really just like connect with people where they are and
Yep.
form, more importantly than anything, some sense of trust and mutual understanding. And then
Mhm.
change just seems to happen naturally once you can connect with somebody on the level of like, hey, I see you. I might not agree with everything you believe or think, or we might have completely different values, but we're both humans and we're both on a journey. And if we can find some place of seeing each other, then it opens up a world of possibilities for like mutual growth and understanding.
Totally. Yeah, we've gotten back to the Tao, right? Just like reading the Tao and not trying to force, when the Tao's going this way, you don't try to push against it. You move with it. And like, oh, okay. That's something I'm always trying to check with my students of just like where they're at. And I'm like, and if I try to push them and get them in put them in a box, for where they're not at, it's just a pain in the ass and it feels horrible. But I just kind of wait and watch and observe. And then when they're in that right spot, and I'm like, oh, they're ready now, just barely got to poke them, and then like, oh, there it goes. That was easy. So yeah, I like this spiral dynamics. I'm gonna have to
Yeah,
invest.
you got to check it out. I'll send you some stuff, some links, and
Yeah.
I've had a couple different episodes with this Steve McDonald, the guy out in Australia who's sort of like one of the main proponents trying to kind of like bring this stuff, because the research was done in the 60s, but the guy died, I think it was the 60s, but the guy died before he published his research. So it kind of never really got into mainstream consciousness. And you're only really attracted to it once you hit a certain like level of, like a certain value system. Once you can kind of see, uh, you know, it makes more sense once you get into it. But before you can sense that other people are actually living from completely different value systems, then the
Mm.
model doesn't really make a lot of sense or interest you very much. But once you can kind of sense like, oh, a Trump supporter or a Antifa person or a this or a
Right.
that, it's like all these different people. It's not just that they are the same as you, but they disagree. It's like they're literally living from a completely different set of
Uh-huh.
values, life experiences,
Huh.
complexity of circumstances. So, they're essentially living in a different world or a different reality, in a lot of ways. And so,
Yeah. Then the internet creates more, insulates that reality even more, and feeds it even
exactly, exactly. And
more.
so you kind of get to this certain point where you start to sense into that more and see that, and you can kind of start to sense like where people are functioning from,
Mm.
like what their value system is and what's driving their behavior, and that can help you to like work with people and understand them better.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's good stuff. But I wanted to get back to your wilderness school and like what is more specifically, what are you doing on your uh what would you call it? Are they retreats that you're doing? Like, is it multi-day things that you're doing with your?
Yeah. So it's like an extended weekend. So it's 4 days, 4 days at a time. So people come out, camp, set up their tent, and that first day we'll have our opening circle and kind of like, okay, here we are. Here's what we're doing for the weekend.
Mhm.
Um, and then really it just kind of becomes a village, is like one of the more beautiful parts of this program is we have a certain skill that we're playing with, you know. So like last month, every individual tanned their own deer hide, you know, and
Mm,
went home with some beautiful, soft, supple suede, you know, leather. And but within that, there's kind of like a free form, like, you know, it's just like, what do you want to do? Like my general, as a teacher, my general rule is just like, what will help this person come alive? You know, sometimes it is doing skills, and sometimes it is taking a nap. You know, like sometimes people just need to come and like, it's so funny. People come from society and they're like, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to do some skills. And the first day they're just like, I'm exhausted, I need to take a nap. And like, they're like usually like not nap people, you know, they're like, I'm not a nap
sure.
person, I'm not sleepy, but I need to sleep. And I've been tracking this the last couple of years, and it's like, oh, your nervous system is shot.
I
And then
was
you
just gonna ask you that.
yeah, they come to the woods, and then they're hanging out with people that they trust, they built relationship with, that we've worked through issues with. You know, we have a structure, so everyone knows like where we're at with everyone. It's not so anxiety, you know, invoking. It's like, oh, I'm with my people in the woods, cool. And then they're like, oh, and then all of a sudden, like the last month has caught up to them, you know, in one day.
Yeah.
And so the first day, a lot of people are just like, I need to just like chill and do nothing. And I'm like, great, like that's part of the resistance, you know, like
Yeah.
that is important too, is to rest. And once again, I as a teacher could fight against the Tao and be like, no, pay attention. I need to, you know, you need to catch up and learn this. It's like, why would I do that? Why would I fight against that? Rest, go sleep, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then beyond that, you know, so in the mornings we do our meditation and different breath work. You know, we do different kinds of breathing techniques. We do bioenergetics, which is like kind of like Kundalini yoga, kind of finding armoring in our bodies and holding certain postures to undo some of that armoring, undoing some of our trauma that's stored in our bodies. We'll do skills. We cook food on the fire. We tell stories around the fire at night. People bring, you know, instruments or their own personal life stories and share around the fire at night. We play games, we laugh, we, you know, whatever, play camouflage.
Cry.
Oh yeah, oh shit, we cry a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
crying
great.
in there, a lot of opening up, and you know, just allowing ourselves to be witnessed, and you know, just like, okay, everyone, like I have a feeling, I need to let this out, and no one needs to fix me, or here I go, you know, and just let it out, and it's really fucking brilliant, you know. And I would like to take my ego would like to take credit for for it all. But it's really just following the Tao and following our ancestry, and you know, and letting people do what we've been doing for millions of years. So.
So it sounds like, that's maybe where the holistic aspect comes from in the name is sort of like, to me it sounds like more than just hey, come out and I'll teach you how to make a fire. It's more of a comprehensive, like you say in the name, holistic. Like it's about, you know, emotions and the way we show up in the world and blockages and
Mhm.
energetics and maybe you could speak to that a little bit, I guess.
Yeah, totally. When I first want to start my school, I was just like, I hate the word survival. You know, like I hate it. It was just like it's been used to sell shit. It's been used to make us seem like we're fighting against nature. You know, and I was just like,
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not fucking using the word survival. And somewhat my buddy, my mentor and buddy, was just like, no, you got to use it. He's like, you got to rename it. You got to re-own it. You know.
Mm,
I'm like, fuck, like, damn, that's a long road, you know, shit, okay. Um, but the thing is, like, if we're talking about survival here, like, what is going to kill us? Like, what is modern day survival? It's not, you know, it's probably more about community, expressing our emotions, not eating shitty food, you know, and like going back to our culture, you know, like going back to our village building. If we don't have that, like, you know, we get depressed and get, you know, whatever, all the issues that come with all the shit food we eat, and we don't move our bodies, and we feel alone, and we feel dark and depressed, and we fucking kill ourselves or whatever, you know, like so it is survival. And if we do want to continue to live on this planet, we have to learn how to connect to the planet. We have to learn how to care about it. We have to learn how to stop, you know, supporting these big industries that are just fucking destroying this planet, and we have to learn how to grow our own food a bit by bit. And so So it is survival, it is, but it's not what most people think of when they hear survival, but what are the chances you're going to be out in the woods and be stranded for 4 days? Fucking pretty much zero, like
Yeah.
there's a huge grief in that for me. I wish there were more wild places where people could get lost, but
Yeah.
in the United States specifically, it's really fucking hard. Like there's still like big parks and things like that, but if you just walk in one direction, you're eventually going to find a road or a creek or a house or whatever, like it's pretty hard to get lost.
Yeah.
American West, it's a little bit easier to get lost out there, but it's just not likely that any of us are going to find ourselves in a survival situation anytime soon, without some sort of like giant collapse of our society.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is our survival. This is, like learning how to connect and how to feel, how to work through our shit and how to take that moment to breathe and make a conscious choice. Like that is our survival. And so I do teach people how to survive in the woods, but I kind of like, I'm always like, yeah. Like that's important to know how to not freeze to death. Okay. But moving on, how do you feel right now? Like, tell me what's in your heart,
Yeah.
And that makes people cringe sometimes, and they got to get used to that. But that's really the important thing of, if we're holding trauma in our bodies, shit just gets real fucking bad real fast. We all got trauma in our bodies. Like, there's no done. We're not done with it. We've been
Yeah.
living this shitty culture for so long, and all the things that have happened in the last couple hundred years that lives in our bodies. And so we got plenty of shit to breathe through and work through and move through. So
I love what you're saying. And I think you're pulling it off. I think you are reclaiming the word survival. And when I saw, I think that's what attracted me to what you're doing. And when Sean shared your post and when I checked out your page, I just got the sense right away that it's like there's something different about this. It's not just
cool.
a guy doing a survival thing, like there's just a different energy there. And beyond that, I love what you're saying about like it still is survival in terms of like if we keep going on the trajectory we're going, like we're going to destroy ourselves. Um,
Yeah,
or at least we're going to be very unhealthy. Like, people are more unhealthy than ever, regardless of lifespan, which I think is actually declining now, I want to say. But still, it's like, who cares if we're living until we're 100 if we're just
right.
sick and depressed and,
Yeah.
and so it's like, and it feels to me, and tell me if you can relate to this or if you agree with this, I have this sense that like, um, some sort of cultural trauma, not only just our own personal traumas, but like an ancestral trauma is part of what drives our life direction as like a culture. Like it's part of what attracts us to wanting to distract ourselves with more and more technological advancements. Like it's almost like a Gnosticism thing where it's like we're worshiping this God and technology, thinking that it's going to like solve our problems, but we're just like ignoring the real. I know there's no real distinction between technology and nature when when you really look at it,
Right.
from a distance perspective. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I think just for me personally, I feel like I'm realizing that part of what keeps me disconnected from nature is my own trauma. So when I put myself in nature and, confront myself with more direct experiences like
Mm-hmm.
foraging for something or camping or whatever, like it brings up my own
Mm-hmm.
trauma just naturally. Like I'm sort of like just confronted with my fears about nature, my insecurities about myself, my feeling of being alone or disconnected from the environment, my fear of animals or the fact that I'm not connected to plants and animals anymore. I don't know how to, like all these things just bring up things inside of me. So it's almost like it's maybe you're not gonna, get lost in the woods per se,
Mm-hmm.
but
You're
it might you're gonna find some sort of trauma, and working through that stuff might help you to let go of a, you know, soda addiction or like
gonna.
cigarettes or,
Yeah.
might help you connect deeper with your loved ones or whatever the case.
Totally. Yeah, I mean nature's the perfect teacher. Like that's what I saw. when I started working in wilderness therapy. You know, we were all, I'd be hiking with the kids, and they would like all have, you know, backpacks that they made out of sticks, and like we'd be struggling to get up this mountain. And one kid would be like, fuck this, I want to use fucking drugs right now. And I'm like, okay, you know, and then another kid's like, fuck this, I hate my parents. Or like, okay. And the other kid's like, fuck this, I'm a piece of shit, I'm horrible. You know, and you're just like,
Yeah.
we're all doing exactly the same thing right now, but it's bringing about exactly what needs to be brought up.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with healing. And that's, if there's, you know, one thing to remember about healing is that you have to go to the dark places. That's what healing is. Like, you have to re-trigger the trauma and hopefully do it in a safe place, in a place that you feel held and supported.
Sure.
But there's this really insidious part of our culture that I think is, I don't know if it's intentionally built in, but here we are, right? Of of avoidance of those dark places. So we sit on our phone and we don't have to think about anything, right? I can just fucking scroll, and like, oh, I don't have to think, I don't have to feel. I can sit on the couch. I'm very comfortable. Oh, great. I don't have to do anything. Like, everything comes to me. But that's not going to heal your stuff. In order to heal, you have to go into it, you know. And I think that's the big misconception about healing is it
Yeah.
is nirvana, and I'm blissed out and everything's great. And it's like, no, actually, you got to go to the fucking depths. You know, you have to feel your grief and feel your sadness and feel your depression and feel all those things fully. And then as soon as you feel them, they often move on, right? It's like,
Mhm.
it's that thing we were talking about. As soon as that thing is ready to transition, then all you have to do is like go into it, and then it moves on, right? That's how nature works. We go in these big cycles where, you know, it's just, you can't go to the next stage until you're done with that stage. And so we get stuck in these patterns and we feel depressed all the time because we're not feeling it fully. We're not getting to the root source of it. So yeah, when we go out in nature, there's nothing to distract us. Nature is this beautiful mirror that reflects all of these things back to us. You know, it's just like this like beautiful brick wall that everything we throw at it, it just hits us right back in the head. And so it's a beautiful opportunity for people to see where they're stuck and see their patterns. And oh my God, yeah, I didn't realize this, and I have a fear here, and I feel guilty about this. And it's like, great, that's fantastic, and that's how we're going to heal. And then after it, you feel great. But if you always sit on a couch and stay on technology, it's really hard to go to those places. And even notice them, you know. And so we kind of
Mhm.
get the feeling all the time.
Yeah. One thing I just remembered that I want to talk about
Yeah.
before we get too close to the end here is like your Instagram profile says you're naked and afraid
Yeah.
survivalist 3 times. I mean, tell me about this. Like my girlfriend's son was on a kick of watching Naked and Afraid for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got a kick out of it. And then seeing that, I was like, oh, no way, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess just tell me about what that was like, how it happened, and just like what were your
Yeah.
experiences were like.
Well, it's kind of funny because it's like my alter ego in a way, where it's like I feel like Superman Clark Kent kind of thing, where they're kind of like two separate lives, where I'm like doing this rebuilding of culture and like, okay, like trauma informed healing and the breath work and all this stuff. And a number of years ago, I guess 6 or 7 years ago now, I got an opportunity to go on Naked and Afraid, which is this like Discovery Channel, cable TV, reality TV show
Yeah.
thing, which the first thing I usually say about it is like my experience and the show they're like entirely different worlds,
Yeah.
and um and I don't, like I'm very grateful for it. Like it was like a fucking great opportunity for me, who is like at heart, like I said, I want to be a hunter gatherer. I want to like hunt big animals. I want to like push my limits. I want to get punched in the face by my traumas and my blocks when I go
Mhm.
in nature and find all those places, go to my inner depths, and so this show was a great opportunity for me to push my edges and also be like supported, like, okay, there's a medic right there, and if anything fucking happens, they got my back. So I've been able to do 3 different adventures with this show, Naked and Afraid. The first one, I went to Namibia, which is Southwest Africa, right next to South Africa. I did 21 days in the high desert there with one woman, a partner named Lindsay, and survived 21 days there. And that was a whole journey, you know. And then the second adventure, I went down to the jungles of Colombia and was with 11 other people. And
Oh,
that
wow.
was, yeah, that was a lot of people. That was a lot of energetics. That was very difficult at times. Made some lifelong friends, met some amazing humans, and met some humans I was like, oh, I don't, no, thank you. And you're starving and you're, doing all that. So it doesn't make things easier. And then the most recent one I did was just about 2 years ago now. And that one I did alone for 21 days in South Africa. And that was like the show did a good job. Really loved, like, it was an emotional ride just to watch my ups and downs and my own learning and, forgetting and remembering and all this stuff. And, but my individual experience on that 21 days in South Africa was like the most spiritual experience I've ever had in my entire life. Like, absolutely brilliant and wonderful. And um, yeah, I actually tell that story around the fire when I go to different gatherings and different places. And it's like a 3 hour long story. It's like fucking epic. And my ancestors came and visited me in my dreams, and I became the animal I was hunting. And it was like
Oh,
totally
shit.
demonic, like fucking brilliant. Suffering, horrible pain, shame, all the darkness too. And but yeah, so I did 21 days there too. So yeah, there's just like millions of stories in all of those adventures. Yeah, so I kind of do that, and that's like I'm not training people in my school to go on Naked Afraid, although I've had a few students go on and do it now. That's not my intention. My intention is to, like, I'm just a bro. Like, I'm a bro. I'm trying to be a healthy bro. And I'm trying to be a earth-based bro. And I'm trying to be a bro for the greater village. Like, how can I bring the gifts of a bro to this world? And one of those gifts is I like to push my edges, and I like to really challenge myself and come back stronger for the village. And so Naked Afraid definitely gave that to me in spades. So
That's beautiful, man.
yeah.
What is it easy to find the episodes or find this? I don't remember how it works, episodes or
Yeah.
seasons where you were on to
I think
see you
it's
in your glory.
yeah, see, careful. Warning, my butt cheeks will be in there. Um, I think it used to be easier. I think it used to just be on YouTube and you could buy each episode or something like that. But I think now it might have to be on Discovery Plus, I think. But I think you can do a week trial for free and you can see it.
Cool. So your wilderness school stuff, so I'm assuming you're currently just doing
Yeah.
your I think maybe we got a little. Can you hear me? Or is our
Oh, I can hear
connection?
you. Did I lose you?
Okay, yeah, I think our connection got a little messed up for a second there, but I was gonna say, your wilderness school stuff, I'm imagining that you are just doing that locally right now, but are you ever, you know, would you ever or are you planning to do any wilderness school things in different areas, or are you doing any online stuff or classes or things
Yeah.
online, or I guess what's the future plans and goals and offerings of the holistic wilderness school?
Yeah. Right now, I'm just doing my 10-month immersion classes and private classes in person. So if you come down to the Asheville area, you can, holler at me and I'll be around. You can come out to my 20 acres and play around, learn some skills. Um, the future goal is to offer online classes. So just like follow the year of my immersion, but do it online and learn skills and things like that. So hopefully that'll be coming out next year is my goal. So people can jump on that.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What what's going on with you personally as far as like beyond the wilderness school? Are there what else are you getting into right now, or what's your like next? I feel like we all kind of have a current like obsession or motivation, like people who
Mhm.
are kind of into the stuff that we're into, like what's your thing that you're, is it the land and doing more permaculture type stuff, or what, what's going on with you in that sense?
Yeah, the land is definitely a big one. Just learning my persimmon trees. I'm stoked on persimmons. I got this land and it had a huge persimmon tree. I
I
don't know
don't
if
know
you
much about those.
I was gonna say you're a northerner. You probably never even come across persimmon.
No, I don't think so.
I remember I'm originally from Michigan, so I feel your pain. I was like, "What the hell is a persimmon?" It's this little tiny orange fruit that looks like
Okay.
a little pumpkin, and they're like candy. Like they're just like the sweetest thing ever. And I had this huge persimmon tree that was dropping like 10 fruits a day from like October till December, just like raining down candy on me every day.
Nice.
So I'm really stoked on that. I just like them because they're native. They don't get frosted as easily as pears and apples. Like all my pears and apples got totally frosted this year. Late frost got them.
Ah,
So anyway, I'm stoked on persimmons. That's one. Stoked on hunting my own land. That's my next level. It's just like getting totally schooled by these big mountain bucks on the back of my mountain and just like trying to
mm,
love hunting them. So season's coming up, hunting with my own, homemade bows and homemade arrows and all that stuff. So that's fun. And then jujitsu, that's my other big, like, just totally getting my ass kicked, every single day in jujitsu, and how good that feels just to have, because I've just always been a one trick pony where I'm just like primitive skills of a different variety. I'll tan hides, I'll make fire, I'll make bows and arrows, and it's great. And I still obsessed with all those things. But it feels good just to get something that's like totally different. And jujitsu's kind of been that thing where just another craft to like dive into and see all the metaphysical truths within it. So that's been really fun for me.
hell yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Making me want to get into jujitsu.
Oh, dude, if you got the mind for it, it's like it's all about being in your center and in balance. And if you're too far this way, it opens up a thing. But if you're too far that way, it opens up a thing. And so like
Uh,
I'm almost not quite because I like the physicality of it, but I'm almost learning it just because I'm just like, oh my god, this is like such moment by moment, am I in my center, and am I conscious, am I aware of what's going on, because it's so easy just to like freak out your nervous system as someone's trying to like choke you out, and then to be like totally oblivious to what you're doing with your arms and legs.
mm-hmm.
And it's like, how can I breathe, stay in the moment, and try to work my way out of this jam. And it's
Yeah,
great training for life. So
nice.
yeah.
So, how can besides just I think everyone who's on Instagram who listens to this should definitely follow you to check out what you're doing because I think it's great stuff. But how else should people like, you know, stay up to date on what you're offering and stay tuned for any online things you might offer or
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, holisticsurvivalschool.com. That would be the best way. But you can sign up for the email list and
mm,
just be warned. As a nature guy, I'm happy if I get 4 emails out every year. So Instagram is a good place to follow me, and the website's a good place to follow me. So those two
awesome,
places.
man.
If anything big happens, it'll be on there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, man, it's been a pleasure. Like I've definitely been getting into spending more time in the woods and foraging and, gardening and trying to learn all this sort of stuff. But the straight up sort of survival skill stuff, I've been interested in quite a while here. And it's something that I haven't done like any type of real immersion into that kind of stuff. So this conversation is definitely kind of increased my motivation to just make it happen. I'd love if I could come out there and do it with you. I don't know when
Yeah.
I'll be out in that area, but if I ever find myself headed in that direction, I would definitely love the opportunity to do it with you. Otherwise, I'm just gonna try to, start somewhere and find a way to get it going.
Hey,
But
that's a great way to start too.
yeah,
Yeah, man, I would love anytime you come down, just let me know. I'd love to have you over and teach you some things and, compare some notes on some permaculture stuff. And yeah, I've appreciated the conversation. It felt really awesome, and yeah, felt good and felt connective. So I appreciate,
great.
yeah, what you're bringing. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, man. I just love, I don't know exactly. I mean, I started this podcast for various different reasons. I think part of it was that ego trick thing of feeling like, oh, if I could have a people that listen to this, then I'll be okay or whatever. And
Yeah.
that quickly devolved into a bunch of personal suffering. But I think
Mhm.
what came out of it was realizing like, oh, I don't really care that much if anybody listens to it. I hope if people listen to it, they find something that, maybe they find themselves on a similar journey as I am and they find something of value. But really, what it's about is me being able to connect with people like you and
Mhm.
feel like, oh, there are other people out there that are going through things I'm going through, that are at different stages in these journeys, and I can feel like not just one little speck trying to, get out of the blob or whatever.
Yeah, man, you've never been alone. We've never been alone. There's always someone else on that same journey with us. It just feels like we're alone.
No doubt. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate it, Jacob.